Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 8th annual UCSF Last Lecture. My name is Aishwarya Thakur, and I'm the Vice President of the Associate Student Body of the School of Medicine. Thank you all so much for coming out tonight. Please take a moment to ensure that your phones are on silent before we begin tonight's program. So we began the process of tonight's last lecture months ago when we asked students from the student governments from each school to put together our nominee list. From this list, hundreds of students from all of our UCSF programs voted, and the winner of our speaker tonight is Dr. David Wofsy. Dr. Wofsy started his medical career at UC San Diego, and then received his residency and rheumatology fellowship here at UCSF. He is currently a professor of medicine and microbiology and immunology, and also the associate dean for admissions for the School of Medicine. His research is directed towards developing novel therapies for autoimmune diseases, and he has been a part of numerous NIH studies, served on the Arthritis Advisory Committee of the FDA, and also is part of the American College of Rheumatology. He was honored with the Presidential Gold Medal in 2015, the American College of Rheumatology's highest honor. During his time as Dean of Admissions, he has been a part of thousands of future physicians' journeys and has been able to admit a class that continues to be more diverse, more talented, and more passionate. When I was interviewing for medical school, anytime I would visit my parents, my dad would always put on the UCSF YouTube videos on TV. Among the videos he would subtly, not so subtly, make me watch were the UCSF Last Lecture series. I have a suspicion he really wanted me to come here if I got in. Months later, I did get in. Thank you. My dad's wishes came true and my dream came true. And I still remember Dean Wofsy's simple email that said, "Congratulations, I hope to see you at UCSF in July. Sincerely, David Wofsy." It feels very full circle to have the honor to introduce him today for today's last lecture. All of those who have had the pleasure of hearing Dean Wofsy's welcome speech during interview day can attest to the fact that he has a way of making us all feel special, like we belong and we deserve to be here. Dean Wofsy announced his retirement earlier this year, and this coming year will be his last year with us. Dean Wofsy, we'd all like to thank you for your kindness, your thoughtfulness, your dedication to students and medical education, and your chocolate chip cookies. And so, on behalf of the UCSF student body, I ask Dr. Wofsy, if you had but one last lecture to give, what would you say?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Wow. Well, first of all, thank you for that wonderful introduction. Thank you all for the warm welcome. I've had some nice honors in my career. You heard about some of them. I don't expect ever to have one that's more meaningful to me than to have been chosen by the students to give this lecture, nor one more intimidating, I might add. So anyway, I want to thank the students for this opportunity, but even more than that, for the sort of warmth and friendship you've shown me over all the years. I really appreciate it. I imagine many of you know the origin of the last lecture series, but for those of you who may not, it's probably worth a minute at the beginning. About 12 years ago, a faculty member at Carnegie Mellon, having learned that he was terminally ill with cancer, decided to give one last lecture. Mostly it was a reflection on his life. And since that time, you know, the lecture went viral, And other places have thought that would be interesting to ask someone to, what would they say if they had one last lecture? Fortunately for me, I don't qualify on the same grounds that he did. So it will be part reflections on my life, but it also has some roots in a more common academic tradition in which an older member of the community is asked to inspire the next generation and impart some, profound wisdom that students are presumed to lack. So first, and I can see you already think that's laughable, so I don't need to say that I think it's laughable too. That's not how I think wisdom works. And I brought along a book to make that point before we even get started. I'm going to read you a few things from the first pages of that book. The book is entitled The Physician Himself, which already gives you some sense of the perspective of the author. And when you open the book, there's a somewhat more thorough title, The Physician Himself and Things That Concern His Reputation and Success. Emphasis again on his. So a friend of mine called my attention to this book a few years ago. It had been given to his father upon his father's graduation from medical school. And believe it or not, this book was given to graduates from medical school in the United States and in England over a 50-year period through at least 10 editions until it was last published in 1931. And I thought you might be interested to see what these two gentlemen thought was appropriate wisdom to pass on to the next generation. This is literally starting with the first page of the book, so I'm going to read to you a few passages here. There are gentlemen in the ranks of our profession who are perfectly acquainted with the scientific aspects of medicine and can tell you what to do for almost every ailment that affects humanity, who nevertheless, after earnest trial, have never achieved either reputation or practice because they lack professional tact and business sagacity. And there is nothing more pitiful than to see a worthy physician deficient in these qualities, waiting year after year for a practice and a consequent sphere of professional usefulness that never come. Okay, so here comes the advice for those poor souls. Were such a physician to ask me, what shall I add to the strictly scientific to make my success in practice more certain, more rapid, and more complete? I should advise him as follows. The location and appearance of your office will have a great deal to do with your progress. Select one in a genteel neighborhood. So they didn't seem to be so concerned about service to the underserved, who later in this chapter are referred to as the great unwashed. Honest. Do not allow the ladies of the family to lounge about your office, read your books, answer the office bell, etc., lest it repel patients. Do not induce young men to study medicine, as there are already 3 doctors where one is required. Besides, either their success or failure may work an injury to yourself. Take care to be neat in your personal appearance. Above all else, wear a clean shirt and a clean collar, for if you dress well, people will employ you more readily, accord you more confidence, expect a larger bill, and pay it willingly. Even though you may have a homely figure and a baboon face. It's the truth. You never heard a bank swindler, or a confidence man, or a counterfeiter, or a pseudo-gentleman of any kind who dressed shabbily or appeared coarse. Such people are all close students of human nature, and no matter how abandoned they are, no matter how tarnished their characters, nor how blackened their hearts, they manage to hide their deformities as a veil from all but the few who know their true characters by assuming the dress and manners of gentlemen. Now, if the genteel dress and polished manners can do so much for such fallen specimens of mankind, how much greater influence must they exert for those who are truly gentlemen and members of a lofty profession. So I won't go on. That's what these two gentlemen thought was good advice for medical students. What they didn't know is at the same time they were setting a very low bar for my talk, which I appreciate. So it emboldened me to construct my own book for this occasion. And my book is entitled Fleeting Observations and Temporary Wisdom. Okay? So, chapter 1. In the beginning, there was Wofsy. So, the first mention of my family is recorded in the Bible. According to Numbers, chapter 13, Moses instructed 12 families to send sons into the land of Canaan and report back. One of those sons was Nabi, son of Wofsy. Now, as I interpret that biblical passage, we were spies. I don't really know what happened to Nabi, if he ever got out of the land of Canaan, but somebody from the family must have survived, because 4,000 years later, my grandfather, Isidore Wofsy, was born. All four of my grandparents were born in Eastern Europe and immigrated to the United States around the turn of the 20th century. They were relatively poor, hardworking, loving people whose courage in making that trip and whose sacrifices when they got here are the things that provided for me everything I inherited, all the opportunities. For me, they symbolize the aspirations of immigrants of all eras to have for their children the same things my grandparents provided for us. My parents were children during the Great Depression, newlyweds when my father entered the Army during World War II, and political targets during the McCarthy period in the 1950s and for quite a while thereafter. Like my grandparents, they experienced hardships that were far more than any I've had to endure. Their commitment to progressive social change and to peace shaped my values and my view of the world. And while I'm introducing you to the family in which I grew up, that's my sister Carla in the middle, and I'll leave it to you to guess who the little boy is on my father's lap. My father's here today. All 97 years of him are sitting here in the third row. And I have to say, one of the things that pleased me most when I found out I was going to get to give this lecture was the opportunity to thank him publicly and to do my best to show off for him. That's what children do. And that brings me to chapter 2, which is entitled, Just Lucky, I Guess. So here's a picture of my son, Kevin, age 5 days. I won't try to deny the interpretation you've already made that I must have been looking forward to playing ball with Kevin. But it didn't work out that way. Kevin had no interest in ball sports. It was obvious very early in his life. In fact, by the time he was 6 years old, my mother asked him, "Why do you suppose you don't like sports?" And he said, "Just lucky, I guess." So Kevin isn't here today. His talents ended up to be in music and writing and performance. And in those pursuits, I have to confess, he never tore an ACL, he never broke a bone, he never sustained a concussion. I'm sure he's much happier where he is. Today, where he is Detroit. He has a part-time job working as a roadie with one of the companies that performs Hamilton around the country. And I'm sure he's a lot happier doing that than he would be if he had followed an athletic career. So I had to explain to Kevin, since he wasn't going to be here to see it for himself, I had to explain to him the whole concept of the last lecture, right? And so I did. He thought about it, and he said, "I'll tell you a story." And he told me the following story. He said, I once took an art history class from an old and very renowned art historian. And he walked in on the first day of class and he set down his books and he said, welcome to Art History 413 or whatever number it was. You may have noticed that I wrote almost everything on your reading list. So let me explain. At my age, I have little patience for other people's opinion. So some of you in the audience know Kevin and will immediately recognize his irreverent style of humor, but I think he was also just trying to remind me not to be too full of myself just because I was giving this lecture. So there's Kevin on the right as he looks today with his partner Brett. Brett's here today, and I'm thrilled that he's representing Kevin. So in any case, it turns out I was like Kevin. I was lucky in ways that I never anticipated, both personally and professionally. Professionally, I consider myself extremely lucky to have been at UCSF during what I consider to be a golden period. And I assure you, luck played a role. I mean, maybe luck plays a role in everybody's life, but luck played a role for me, and I'm going to describe it. So here I am, about the time that my fellowship was ending in the immunology lab at the VA hospital. I was getting ready to leave UCSF. I'd been a resident here. I'd done my training in rheumatology here. I figured it was time to move on. I'd already had a conversation with my division chief who had said to me, I suppose you know you have no future at UCSF. There are several people in the audience that know this is an absolute true story. I won't give you the background for this quote. It's not important. What's important is what happened next. He left UCSF before I could. And that created a vacuum in rheumatology that brought Bill Seaman in at a young age to be chief of rheumatology at the VA, and that in turn made it attractive for me to stay. It was just lucky, right? I had nothing to do with my boss's decision to move to Texas. So years later, I was at a Christmas party. Paul Voberding is here, Molly Cook is here. It was at their house. And a friend tapped me on the shoulder and said, I have the job for you. She was chairing the committee that was searching for a new associate dean for admissions. I hadn't even applied for the job. Among other things, I wouldn't have thought I'd be a very strong candidate for the job. But she was the proverbial friend in high places, and I was in the right place at the right time, and I got the best job in the whole institution. It was another stroke of remarkable good luck. And I can't help but tell you that there was also a very interesting coincidence associated with this. The person who saved my career at the beginning, Bill Seaman, and the person who tapped me on the shoulder about the admissions job, Maxine Papadakis, not only found me, they found each other. So really, in more ways than I can count, I am fortunate to know these two people. But beyond these personal strokes of good luck, I'm lucky to be at UCSF for the same reason we're all lucky to be at UCSF, and I'd be remiss if I didn't use some of the time in this talk to express that pride. At its best, UCSF lives out the true meaning of what it is to be a public institution with a public responsibility. In its educational mission, in its clinical mission, in its scientific mission, and there are examples in all of these realms. But for me, the prime example is always going to be the early days of the AIDS epidemic. So the students in the audience, and amazingly many of the young faculty in the audience, weren't even born, right? When the first AIDS cases showed up more or less simultaneously in New York and Los Angeles and San Francisco in 1981. But you all know, as a matter of history, what a terrifying time that was. Some men would come in with a rare cancer we hadn't ever seen. Some of us couldn't remember ever even hearing of it. Other men would come in with a catastrophic pulmonary infection, spend a few days or a week or two in the ICU and die, and at autopsy, they had an opportunistic infection that never happens in healthy people. And first there was a trickle of these cases, and then there was a flood, and no one knew what was going on. But one of the things that became clear early was that this was a communicable disease, and it could be communicated to healthcare workers. And by and large, healthcare workers and their institutions and society as a whole behaved badly during that period. There are only a few places that behaved properly from the start, and the most prominent of them was the University of California at San Francisco, particularly at San Francisco General Hospital. I mean, you gotta think about this epidemic, right? This was an epidemic that could not have more precisely targeted populations of people that were already marginalized from the healthcare system. Minority communities, gay men, IV drug users, prostitutes. So maybe it isn't such a surprise in retrospect that it was easy for a lot of people to turn a blind eye. But for those of us who were here at UCSF at that time, it's always a reminder of what it means to be the healthcare provider for the disenfranchised people in your community. It's not just talk here. We were tested, we rose to the occasion, and when we're at our best, we still do it now. Now I'm gonna ask you to indulge me a personal photograph from that time of three of the leaders during the early days of the UCSF response to the AIDS epidemic. That's Donald Abrams on the left and Paul Voberding on the right, both of whom are still at UCSF. And my late wife, Connie, who took care of people who were living with AIDS and people who were dying with AIDS throughout her own terminal illness until her death from breast cancer in 1996. These weren't the only leaders during that time, of course. There are many of them, and many of them are still here. But some of the people who played an important role then, people like Merle Sandy, John Mills, Marcus Conant, Jay Levy, Julie Gerberding, and a host of others who took care of people with AIDS, who developed strategies to prevent AIDS and new approaches to the treatment of AIDS, and then spread those discoveries around the world and eventually contributed to transforming HIV from a uniformly fatal disease to, in most cases, a manageable chronic illness. When UCSF cites its slogan, right, advancing health worldwide, that's what it means. It's real. Now, you may be wondering, right? It's me giving the talk. What was I doing during that time? I mean, did I have any contribution at all to make? And the answer is I absolutely did. I had a very key contribution to make during that time. It's been largely lost to history. So this is my opportunity, perhaps my last opportunity, to revive it. So while these people were dealing with life and death issues and the most important medical challenge of the times, I was toiling in obscurity in the VA hospital in an immunology lab, taking care of mice. Waiting for my moment to come, right? And then one morning I went to work in 1991 and it was my time. Rumors were swirling about. Magic Johnson had called a press conference for that afternoon, and he was going to announce his retirement from the Los Angeles Lakers because he was HIV positive. Well, Connie was a lot like Kevin. She had very little interest in ball sports, so I thought I'd better call her up and tell her what was about to happen so she'd be ready. And I did, and she said to me, "Who's Magic Johnson?" So that was my contribution. I spared her the embarrassment of asking anybody else this question. Well, that's all the time I have for the clinical mission of UCSF, but I am equally proud of the scientific mission of UCSF. During the last 30 years, there have been more Nobel Prizes in medicine awarded to faculty at the University of California, San Francisco for medicine than any other place in the world. I mean, what an amazing accomplishment. Michael Bishop and Harold Varmus for the discovery of the cellular origin of retroviral oncogenes. Stan Prusner for the discovery of prions, a novel infectious agent that most people didn't believe existed that's responsible for degenerative neurologic disease. Liz Blackburn for insights into the genetic basis of aging, and most recently, Shinya Yamanaka for demonstrating that mature cells could be transformed into pluripotent cells. It's an extraordinary range of important contributions, but it's not important that we have more Nobel Prize winners than anyone else. It's just nice, right? As I sometimes say to people, the way it affects me is sometimes I'm standing in the lunch line next to a Nobel Prize winner and it feels good. Otherwise, I don't know how it affects me. But what's important is what it says about the quality of the scientific environment at UCSF and the contributions that our scientists make to people who will never walk through our doors. Okay? So in the same month that Shinya Yamanaka received the Nobel Prize, UCSF received the Spencer Forman Award. That's the highest award of the American Association of Medical Colleges for community service. And the simultaneous receipt of those two awards has symbolized for me what we often talk about as special at UCSF. We know there are other great medical schools. It's arrogant to say we're better than all of them. But if there's a secret sauce that makes us different, it's the simultaneous equal strength in basic science and primary care and community service. That's what makes us different. And it used to be easier to maintain a belief that that was the truth. You know, when I started here, the place was smaller. There were fewer faculty, there were fewer sites. We tended to know each other. And it was pretty easy to maintain a sense of mutual respect between the clinicians and the clinical and translational scientists and the educators and the basic scientists, you know, for the essential contribution that everybody was making to the entire enterprise. It's harder now. The faculty is much bigger. We tend not to know people well who do things that are different than what we do, and people are spread out all across the city. So this notion of maintaining this genuine mutual respect is harder to maintain. But I would argue that in this era, especially with dwindling resources that tempt us to fight with each other over a small pool, it's probably more important than ever to maintain that sense of mutual respect and importance. We are all in this together. If anything makes us different, that's what makes us different. And we're lucky to have each other. Now, while I'm talking about luck, it turns out that for many years, on most days, there comes a moment when I think to myself, how did I get so lucky? But it wasn't until recently that I realized that that moment always comes at pretty much the same time. And here's when it happens. I'm walking down the hall. I see somebody coming from the other direction who I admire, who I feel privileged to know. And I think to myself, how did I get this lucky? And, you know, sometimes it's somebody I know well, right? Who might not be so surprised that I have warm feelings about them. But most of the time, it's a faculty member or a staff member who I don't know particularly well. Or maybe it's a student whose name I just can't pull to mind until I'm 5 steps further down the hall and it's too late to address them by name, which I hate about myself. That's when it happens. Those are the moments where I say to myself, how did I get this lucky? It's about the people I've worked with all this time. And frankly, I thought about, is there a way in this lecture to mention the names of all the people who would be surprised to think that's how I feel about them? But I can't. It's too many people, and it's of no interest to anybody else but me. But there are a few people I want to pause to acknowledge because they've had such a big role in my success. And they're people on our staff who tend to be overlooked when faculty members like me get all the credit. So this is Lydia Espino. Most of you don't know her. Lydia has supported my research in rheumatology and the research of many others in rheumatology for years. You're not going to meet a more intelligent person, more dedicated and hardworking than Lydia, nor anybody more kind, more devoted to our patients, or more representative of the best values of UCSF. More of you know these two people, my closest colleagues. My closest colleagues in admissions. On the left is Kathy Ryan. Kathy was already working in admissions and experienced at it when I started there, so she taught me most of what I know about how to do admissions. And on the right, Helen Chung, my indispensable right hand for the last 12 years. Nothing we've accomplished in admissions during that period of time would have been possible without the superb work of these two people or their commitment to academic excellence and diversity. If I were to disappear tomorrow, admissions would run smoothly. It would have fewer chocolate chip cookies. Other than that, you might not notice the change. That's not false modesty. That's the absolute truth. If these two people were to disappear tomorrow, there would be an immediate crisis. I also want to acknowledge three people from Student Academic Affairs and Financial Aid, Lisa Raskulinik, Annie Osborne, and Jerry Lopez. Their quiet, behind-the-scenes commitment to maximizing scholarships for students is extraordinary, and it's done without any thought of personal recognition. So how do I feel about working with all of these people? Like Kevin, just lucky, I guess. And that brings us to chapter 3. Chapter 3 is entitled, Into Each Life Some Rain Must Fall, subtitled, Lessons on Hubris from Henry Wadsworth Longfellow and John Steinbeck. Okay, so in this chapter, we learn that not all luck is good luck. I decided to go into rheumatology because it looked like the field of immunology was exploding at about the time that I was a resident. And it seemed like that it was inevitable for progress in immunology to be transformed into meaningful advances for people with rheumatic diseases. I had no illusions about making a singular contribution to that progress, but I thought it would be exciting and rewarding to be part of the wave. That's what I signed up for, and that's how it turned out to be. I'm not going to describe what a career in research is like, but chapter 3 tells two stories that, in retrospect, are part of a successful career in academic research. So the first story is from really pretty much the beginning of my time on the faculty at UCSF. I was studying a strain of mice that spontaneously develops a disease that closely resembles systemic lupus in people. Okay, so systemic lupus is a serious autoimmune disease that affects primarily young women. At its worst, lupus causes autoimmune kidney disease and can lead to kidney failure, and in some cases, it's fatal. These mice are similar in the sense that the female mice are more severely affected than the males. They make the same autoantibodies that people with lupus make, and the females develop autoimmune kidney disease early in life, and they die young. So at about the time that I was starting to study these mice, it had just been discovered that the difference between the female mice and the male mice could be entirely explained by sex hormones. Female hormones, estrogens, made the disease worse. Male hormones, androgens, protected against the disease. But no one knew how these hormones exerted their effects, so we set out to try to understand what cells might be involved in that process. And the way we decided to do that was we would take female mice. We'd take female mice, we'd give some of them estrogens to accelerate their disease. We'd give others of them androgens to protect against their disease. We'd let the disease play out, and then we would harvest cells from these mice, purify the different cell populations, mix them together in different ways, and inject them back into healthy mice, and see which cells carried the ability to advance the disease and which cells protected against the disease. Okay, so that's what we did. And so finally came the day we harvested cells from these mice. We separated the B cells and the T cells. We took B cells from the estrogen-treated mice, combined them with T cells from the androgen-treated mice, put them into healthy mice. We did the reverse, right? B cells from androgen-treated mice and T cells from estrogen-treated mice, injected them into other healthy mice. And of course, we had controls, mice that got B cells and T cells from the same source, right? And when you do that, you have to irradiate the recipient mice so that you wipe out their own cells, so that what you see in those mice after the transfer is the effect of the new cells. And when you irradiate the mice, they're immunosuppressed, right? And you don't want them to get infections. So you take those cages off the common watering system in the animal house, where they might pick up pathogens from that common watering system. You put them in cages on the counter. You put tops on the cages, you put water bottles on the top of the cages, you use acid water to further protect them against infectious agents. 6 mice to a cage, you carefully label all the cages. Went great. Okay, very long day. I go home, everything's fine. All we got to do now is wait and see what happens in these mice. Came back the next morning and went into the animal house to see what was happening. And to my horror, the mice were having a grand old party. Okay, there were some cages with 11 or 12 mice where there had been 6 the night before. And there were other cages with 1 or 2 apparently antisocial mice. And there were some mice that were gone altogether. And I sat there, I just stood there staring, thinking, who hates me so much that they would have sabotaged my experiment in this way? I mean, did someone come up from Stanford and sneak into the, animal care facility? And I knew a couple of people at Stanford during that time where it was a logical thing to worry about. Anyway, as I stood there, I watched a mouse crawl out of one cage, scamper down the counter, and crawl into another cage. And that's when I realized I was the saboteur, because what had happened is when I removed the mice cages from the common watering system, I hadn't paid attention to the fact that there's a hole in the back of the cages through which the spigot inserts that connects them to the common watering system. Now, I have to say, all these years later, I don't recall if I thought that hole was too small for a mouse to get through, or if I didn't think about it at all, which seems much more likely in retrospect. But that's what was happening. Mice were crawling out of these holes, crawling into the holes of the next cage. I had no idea which mice had gotten which cells. Only the cages were labeled, not the mice. And months of work, not just by myself, but by other people in the laboratory. And who knows how many dollars of grant money was blown in one act of stupidity that you would have assumed an 8-year-old wouldn't do, right? So that's story number 1. Somehow I got through that story and went on to have some successes in these mice, enough successes to advance my career. And I'm going to take this off the screen. I don't like to look at it. In the 1990s, we did a series of experiments that went really well. It got me my only publication in Science. And it led us to think we might have a treatment that would be effective in people with lupus. And that's when I went through the transition in my own career between being a bench researcher to being someone who performed clinical trials of novel therapies of people. And that was a long transition. It took us a long time to generate the grant funding to think about being able to do a clinical trial in people. And it took us a long time to get the drug company to agree to let us use the drug in the treatment of people with lupus. But eventually, in 2008, we got to begin the experiment. And it took 4 years to enroll people in the trial. It took another year to let them all get to the end point. And finally, on February 27th, 2013, we were going to find out the answer. 21 years, right? The first experiment in mice had been done in 1992. This is a peculiar thing, especially for a bench researcher moving to clinical trials. You don't think of 21 years of experiments all coming to a head on one moment, but that's what happens with a clinical trial because it's blinded. You don't know which people are getting which drug, and somebody you don't know is going to push a button at a statistical center in North Carolina at 9 a.m. on February 27th, 2013, and tell you if your trial worked or if it failed, right? So that was my situation the night before. And, it's very hard to think about anything else on that night. You're trying to pass the time. We had reason to think we were really optimistic about what we would find the next day. I was communicating back and forth by email with my closest collaborator and co-investigator in New York, just trying to pass the time. And I finally thought, I'm going to look up if any famous people were born on February 27th and see what they had to say, see if there's any omen there, right? So, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow was born on February 27th, 1807. And he had written, "Into each life some rain must fall," right? And that was not the quote I was looking for. So I kept looking. John Steinbeck was also born on February 27th, 1902, I think. And he had written, "Man is the only kind of varmint that sets his own trap, baits it, then steps in it." And of course, as it turned out the next morning, they were both right. The treatment group and the control group were identical. The treatment had failed. So I tell you these two stories of failure, and not stories about successes, because the mere fact that I'm standing up here in front of the room is evidence enough that I must have had successes. What we don't usually talk about, in fact, what we usually try to conceal, and that's true for me too, are our failures, our disappointments. In my case, our acts of incredible stupidity. But we get through it because of the support of our family and the support of our institution that let us keep trying. And because we know that even these disappointments are part of the wave, and that's what we signed up for. And that brings me to chapter 4. Now, in chapter 2, I expressed my pride in UCSF. Chapter 4 is about things we need to do better. It focuses on 3 wishes. 2 of these wishes are things that are specifically about UCSF, and we can make them come true. And I should be very quick to say, before I even describe these wishes, these are not just my wishes. These are the wishes of the majority of people in leadership at UCSF and the majority of people in our community, many of whom are already working to make them come true. I just happen to be the person who's in a position to give them voice today. The 3rd wish is a wish for the profession as a whole. We can't accomplish it at UCSF, but we can contribute. So, wish number 1. There needs to be a dramatic increase in the diversity of our faculty, particularly with regard to African American faculty, and it needs to happen on a timeline that is entirely unprecedented in our history. Okay, so this figure shows the percent of our faculty that are African American, and I call your attention to the y-axis because it wasn't chosen arbitrarily. The y-axis goes to 12 because 12% of the United States population are African American, somewhere between 12% and 13%. So in 2006, 2.4% of our faculty were African American. In 2018, the most recent statistics that I was able to get from Renee Navarro, 2.8% of the faculty are African American, a skyrocketing change. At this pace of progress, UCSF faculty will reach equivalence with the US population in 120 years. Okay, the year 2139. When those are your numbers, when this is your graph, you have to acknowledge you're part of the problem, not part of the solution. Okay? Now, things aren't quite as grim as this figure makes them look. There actually has been a substantial increase in the absolute number of African American faculty at UCSF during this period as the total size of the faculty has grown. And you can make out, even in this flattish line, that all of the progress has been made in the last 5 years. And it's been made because people have been working very hard on this issue, launching new initiatives, such as the Watson Scholar Initiative, for example. So maybe we can sustain that rate of progress in the future. And it won't take 120 years. It'll take 50. Okay? And that's too long too. Right? So the formula, in my opinion, for doing this in less than 50 years is simpler than you might think. And it starts with simply making a decision that there are no excuses and no rationalizations for the snail's pace of progress over the past several decades. No talk about pipeline issues or competition from other academic institutions or the cost of living in San Francisco. Just make a decision that no other outcome is acceptable. Then set a goal, track the progress toward the goal, and make it happen. I know that sounds naive. I am naive about things like this. But I believe that's an essential first step, and I believe if we take that first step, we can make it happen. And I think we have evidence in our own community that it works. Wish number 2. UCSF should be true to the defining characteristic of public education, and that's affordability. In recent years, the graduation debt for a medical student at UCSF has surpassed the graduation debt at our major private competitors. Okay, so this shows the comparison between UCSF and Harvard. Harvard is the red line. 20 years ago, the average debt of a graduate from UCSF was 30% less than the average debt at Harvard. The lines crossed 10 years ago, and they've continued to diverge, and now the average debt at UCSF is 30% higher than the average debt at Harvard. And there's nothing unique about this comparison. If I were to show you comparisons with our other 2 or 3 main private competitors, they all follow this pattern. Hey, when your graph looks like this, the whole concept of public education loses much of its meaning, right? We don't want to be the people who let this happen. Now, there is good news, and I think many of you know it. In recent years here, it has become a very high priority to reverse this pattern. And through the hard work of a lot of people at UCSF and the generosity of some very big donors, there's been a sharp increase in philanthropic support for scholarships. At the moment, much of that philanthropic support is still in the form of pledges. When those pledges come to reality, it may be possible to change the shape of this curve, although there's no guarantee that even then it will be enough. And in any case, until that happens, we need to think of other ways to impact this graph. Now, I think you're aware of some of the things that are happening on this campus. For example, in the last few years, there's been added to the budget a cost of living adjustment for all the students across the campus to help offset the high cost of housing in San Francisco. That's an important step. But it's not enough. And I would like to think that at some point, we will at least enter into discussion about whether or not there should be a line item in the annual budget of UCSF for student scholarships. Right now, the sources of scholarships are these. The students and their parents contribute to scholarship support through the tuition that's paid, a portion of which is returned to students as scholarships. And the other source is philanthropy, right? There is no line item in the budget separate from those two sources that says UCSF is going to be using some of its revenue to devote to student scholarships. I think it's time to think about whether that should exist. Now, having said that, let me be clear, and I truly believe that the students in this audience know and understand what I'm about to say. Student scholarships is not the only priority on this campus. It's easy to talk about a graph without a context, okay? There are other very compelling needs here that have just as high a priority. Some might argue a higher priority, right? I mean, how do you prioritize the need to provide a living wage to the people who work here so that they can live in the same expensive city in which they work? You have to provide state-of-the-art resources for the faculty that are already here. That's become a big issue on the Parnassus campus so that people aren't tempted to leave and go to other institutions or to private industry. You have to maintain really appealing recruitment packages so that the next generation of outstanding people that are attracted here can maintain the standards that have been set over the last generation. And those are problems that defy easy solutions, especially when resources are limited. So I don't want to be misunderstood here. This is one of many important priorities. But at the moment, I don't think it's on the table when the income of the institution is doled out for next year's budget. It may be that only a token amount can be paid to that. But I think just adding a line onto the budget would be an important statement to say, we're all in this together, and we have a responsibility to change the shape of this curve. Now, before I leave it, I want to make a point. I know the medical school best, and so I'm showing you medical school data. And I'm guessing that most of the people in the audience are from the School of Medicine. But I could show you figures from the other schools here. If I showed you the dental school debt, it would be considerably higher than this. This is not just the School of Medicine problem. Wish number 3 is the big wish. Okay, I hope and I believe that health professionals will play an important role in solving the daunting social, political, environmental, economic challenges that have an adverse effect on human health in the United States and around the world. Climate change, gun violence, poverty, race hatred are among the social determinants of health where we need to be outspoken. Okay? But I'm not going to talk about them today. I'm going to talk about another factor in which physicians have historically been activists, but where I think we've become numb. Beyond the impact of climate change, I think the greatest threat to human health and to human survival is war. Okay? And there are a lot of ways to make that point. We don't talk about it here. We don't really feel it's part of our curriculum. But we live in an evidence-based environment here with a reliance on the medical literature. So I'm going to make the point with an article from the New England Journal. In 2008, there was an article in the New England Journal that described the Iraq Family Health Survey. Okay? What the Iraq Family Health Survey set out to do was to quantify the number of combatant deaths in Iraq during the first 3 years of the Iraq War. But it also quantified the increase in civilian, non-combat related, health-related deaths from diabetes, from all causes. And what they found was that compared to the 3 years prior to the Iraq War, there was an increase of 300,000 health-related civilian deaths in Iraq. Hospitals had been bombed, right? Doctors had fled the country or been killed. Medications were in short supply and access to them was extremely limited. The infrastructure was destroyed. Sanitation was awful. Living conditions were awful. And as a result, on average, during those 3 years, there was an excess of health-related deaths of 275 per day. Okay, it's hard to sort of adjust. What does 275 per day mean? So I'm going to put it in perspective, at least in the way I've tried to understand it. 275 civilian deaths every day is the equivalent of one Twin Towers attack every 10 days for 3 years, right? In a country whose geographic size and population is about the same as Texas. So we don't react to that statistic in Iraq the way we would react if there was a Twin Tower attack in Texas every week or two for 3 years, right? We just don't feel war in the United States the way it's felt in the rest of the world. But I actually added up the number of years in my life that the United States has been at war, troops on the ground fighting in other countries. And the answer is about half my life. And for those of you in the audience who are younger than I am, your country has been at war for more than half your life. I also added up the number of countries we've bombed during that time. And if that brings a number to your mind, I can assure you the number it brought to your mind is too low, because the number is 25. What I haven't been able to quantify are the tens of trillions of dollars that have gone into those pursuits, or the effect that's had on social programs in the United States, such as the ones I was just talking about, public education and student debt. Okay? Politicians aren't going to solve this problem. In my life, we've had these wars under all presidents, liberals and conservatives, Democrats and Republicans. It really feels to me at this point that the only thing that ever gets bipartisan support anymore is the decision to go to war or bomb somebody. Okay? This is going to change if there are movements of people, and I think there is a compelling logic for physicians to have a leadership role in those movements. And there's evidence of it, and there's evidence of impact from places like the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War, or the Physicians for Social Responsibility. So I actually think it's reasonable to wish this wish. Now, there are a lot of important wishes, a lot of things that need to be done. This may not be your wish, right? But I'm hoping that some of the people who come through UCSF and go on in life will make this their wish. So I'm going to pause here for a moment and admit that for the last 2 or 3 weeks, I've struggled with whether chapter 4 belonged in this book at all, the chapter I just told you. I had it out, I had it in, I took out one wish, put in another wish. These are 3 very complicated problems that I've dealt with, right? And you can't deal with them, you can't do justice to them in 5 minutes. My guess, they've each had about 5 minutes in this talk. My guess is that even people in this audience who generally agree with me on these topics will have said it a little different way or taken issue with something I said, and there are no doubt people in this audience who actually disagree with some of the things I've said. But in the end, I left them all in, because if this was my last chance to say anything, these would be among the things that are on my mind. A more diverse faculty, affordable public education, world peace. And if not world peace, at least a more peaceful foreign policy. I'm serious about all of these wishes, but I confess an ulterior motive for wish number 3. It's intended to make wishes number 1 and 2 look really easy. Okay, so that's all the heavy stuff. Thank you for listening. That's what I believe in. The rest of the book is more personal. Chapter 5 is entitled Sleepless in Sapporo. In December 2004, I attended an immunology conference in Sapporo, Japan. On the night before I was to fly home, I was staying in a ryokan. A ryokan is a really nice inn in Japan. Functionally, it's probably a lot like a motel in the United States, but much nicer. But one of the things about a ryokan is you sleep on a mat on the floor. And for that reason, and maybe others, I was having a lot of trouble sleeping that night. But it wasn't the usual trouble sleeping, where you're going through your worries in your mind, and what am I going to find when I go home, and all the work that's piled up. No, I was in a very good mood that night, and I had found my mind wandering to the happiest experiences of my life. And then I did something entirely out of character for me. I can't tell you how entirely out of character. I got up, opened my computer, and decided to write down the happiest experiences of my life. No rules about what was written, no filters, no preconceived notion about how many things would be on the list. Would it be a top 10 list? Just write as fast as things came to mind and see what was there when I finally paused and couldn't quite know what was next. So I did that. And at the end, there were 13 things on the list. I'm not going to read you the whole list. You're probably thinking, what a relief. I'm not going to read you the whole list, but I do want to make some observations about my list. Number one on my list, I truly believe, would be number one on the list of many people in this audience. And it's only for that reason that I'm not embarrassed to tell you what it is. Number one on my list was falling in love. Okay? There's no experience like that. You can't think of an analogy to that experience. So that belongs number one. The rest of the list was dominated by my children, and to a lesser extent, other members of the family. So now's the time I should introduce you to the children you haven't met yet. Okay? This is my daughter, Susan. Kevin's in Detroit, but I can always count on Susan to be present. So, and these 4 pictures, each one of them is from a different item on my list of 13. So I am hoping that Susan will see this and realize what a contribution she's made to my happiness. Now, a lot's happened since 2004. So if I made a list now, it would definitely include a very unconventional wedding with Teresa Fitzgerald and a very happy marriage. And it would certainly include a moment that I always refer to as Wheels Up in Cincinnati, when Grace joined the family. Okay? But what struck me most about my list was what wasn't on it. There was nothing on it about academic achievement. I had devoted my career to academic life. I had been successful at it. I had enjoyed it. And it wasn't on my list. In fact, the only thing that was on my list that pertained to my time at UCSF was an entry entitled Memorable Patients, along with their names. I really wanted to say their names out loud here. I am sure every one of them, if they thought that I would be mentioning their name in this context, would be thrilled. But I'm going to obey HIPAA. I know this is going to be online, and I've already said other things that are going to get me into trouble. I don't need to mess with HIPAA. But it was a shock to me. You know, there was no time in my career after my fellowship that I devoted more than 20% of my time to patient care. And patients were the only thing that made my list. Now, if I were to make a new list now, there would be an academic achievement on it, okay? So in the 14 years that I've been admissions dean, more than 2,000 people have come through UCSF and graduated as doctors, okay? To have played a small part in launching their careers has been an extraordinary experience. All of the things these people will accomplish in their life, all of the patients they'll help, all of the lives they'll save, all of the discoveries they'll make, all of the ways they'll change and improve healthcare delivery in the United States, that's a legacy that brings me great pride. And within that legacy, the greatest pride, as you heard in the introduction, is in the growing diversity of the class. So this slide shows the diversity in the student body at UCSF since the year 2000. I became Associate Dean for Admissions in 2005. Prior to that time, on average, 18% of the student body came from racial and ethnic groups that are underrepresented in medicine. Between 2006 and 2011, it was 29%, and in the most recent period, 2012 to 2018, 32%. Now, individuals don't make this kind of change. I just want to be as absolutely clear as I can. Many factors go into this kind of change, starting first and foremost with the extraordinary talent and quality of the applicants who we accepted. but also including the commitment of the admissions staff, of countless faculty who were committed to this goal and who participated in the admissions process. It's attributable to the students who came here and worked hard with us to recruit the next classes. And it's attributable to the people in financial aid who worked hard to increase financial support for students so that wasn't an obstacle to people coming to UCSF. And it certainly was attributable to the people to whom I report and who were unwavering in their support for this change. Currently, Catherine Lucy and Talmadge King, and before them, Dave Irby and Sam Hawgood. I mean, all of that went into this. You don't make this change so that you can boast about it, right? We do this because it's our job, right? There is compelling literature that says if you're responsible to turn out doctors to take care of the diverse population of the people of California, you better be turning out a diverse workforce. If you don't, you're not fulfilling your public trust. That's why this happens. But even before you fulfill your public trust, even before it impacts society, it changes your institution, right? And you all know that. If we didn't have a diverse class, there is no way UCSF would have been among the few schools that launched the White Coats for Black Lives movement that's now spread across the country as a powerful force for change. And if that hadn't happened, the New England Journal wouldn't have been writing about it and wouldn't have been addressing issues of racism in medicine. And if you didn't have a class full of people who cared about that, we probably wouldn't have scoured our curriculum to remove stereotype threat and examples of racism and sexism and homophobia. We wouldn't have re-examined our grading system to look for unnoticed bias in our approach to grades or AOA. We probably wouldn't have diversified the residency programs, which has been one of the big pieces of progress in recent years. You don't have to wait a long time to see the impact of diversity. It's all around us, and it's made us better. Okay? And here's the last chapter. Ooh, I'm late. You laugh too much. It's your fault. But this is the last chapter, and it's not as long as the others. I haven't shown you the title of the last chapter yet. The title of the last chapter is the same as the title of the last entry in my list of happy experiences. And I'm including it because it's in the spirit of this talk to be honest about who you are. So I'm admitting a guilty pleasure to conclude. The last chapter in my book is entitled Baseball as an Emotion. My daughter is hiding her face, but she's symbolizing baseball as an emotion in this photograph. In a moment, I'm going to read to you the entry under baseball as emotion on my list, but I need to explain something to you first. I was born in New York City when the Dodgers, the Giants, and the Yankees all had New York teams. If you were a little boy in New York, you cared about baseball. And I was born 4 months before Jackie Robinson broke the color line. And I became a Dodger fan because of Jackie Robinson and Roy Campanella and Don Newcomb, and also some of the white players, Pee Wee Reese and Duke Snider, and lots of other people whose names mean nothing to you, who will be vivid in my memory until the moment I die. Okay? I was among those little boy Dodger fans who argued that Duke Snider was better than Willie Mays, right? I even knew then it wasn't true, but I argued it. But somehow, over the course of time, I made a transition that would have been unthinkable to me as a child. I transferred from being a Dodger fan to a Giant fan. But that's why my list is equal parts Dodgers and Giants. Here's what I wrote. An array of special baseball moments should count as a single experience. Call it the experience of sport as an emotion. The Dodgers' first World Championship in Brooklyn, listening to Sandy Koufax's perfect game on a portable radio, the Polo Grounds and Yankee Stadium and Ebbets Field with my father in New York, and 50 years later, returning the favor by taking him to a game that Barry Bonds ended with a game-winning home run in the bottom of the ninth. a Giants game with Kevin and Susan for Father's Day in 1998. Being among close friends from Boston when the Red Sox finally beat the Yankees. Crying every time at the end of Field of Dreams. Okay, that was my 2004 list. It was a pretty good list. Like now it would include 3 world championships as a Giants fan. It would include taking my father to see Tim Lincecum pitch in the World Series 74 years after he had seen Carl Hubble pitch for the Giants in the World Series. He may be the only human being who can say that. It would include taking Grace to her first baseball game when she was 3 weeks old. And in one of those amazing things that just shows you the unpredictability of life, even Travis Ishikawa might have been in my book. And if you don't understand why, ask somebody near you and it'll become clear. I don't know why sports move me so much, but they do. I don't expect ever to understand the deep psychological explanation for that. But one of the factors, I'm sure, is that in sports, you know when you win, and you know when you celebrate. The game is over, the World Series is over, you look at the scoreboard, you know you won, and it's time to celebrate. Real life isn't like that. Real life doesn't have a lot of absolute victories and unrestrained celebrations. We tend to think more about the disappointments and dwell on them. And I think preparing this talk for me and thinking back on things helped me sort of think about the fact that I really needed to notice the everyday victories more than I do and take time to celebrate them. I think, for many people, that sentiment is encapsulated in the phrase, smell the roses, right? For me, it may be closer to play ball. So all of that comes under the heading of fleeting observations. This is all you're going to get for temporary wisdom. Number one, it's all about the people. I didn't actually set out for this to be the theme of the talk. It just became the theme organically, and I didn't notice it till I was done. But it was about the people, and that's true, of course, in our personal lives, we know that, but it was true in my professional life. It's about the people who gave me the opportunities that I've had in my research career, in my associate dean career. It's about the people who stuck with me when I did stupid things. It's about the people I pass in the hall. It's about the patients I remember when I don't remember much else about my career. It's about the students who come through here and go on to do amazing things. I have 2 friends here in the first row. It's about friends you trained with who come from far away because they know you're nervous about giving a talk and they want to be supportive. It's all about the people. Number 2, be part of something bigger than yourself. Something you can't achieve on your own, but that you can achieve by working with other people. So for me in my research career, it's been looking for better treatments for autoimmune disease and lupus in particular. We're not there yet. Someday that will happen, and I will have been part of that. And in my admissions career, it's creating a more diverse workforce. You can't do that alone, but if enough people do it, it'll happen. So that's the second piece of wisdom. The third piece of wisdom, I haven't talked about it all, it's my sister's wisdom. Help the person in front of you. So shortly after my sister Carla died, her daughter told me something that Carla had said to her. Carla had said, you may not be able to change the world, but you can always help the person in front of you. And I've always thought that's about the best advice I've ever heard, and I particularly like it in the context of the second piece of wisdom here. Right? The second piece of wisdom says, be part of something you can't achieve on your own. And the third one reminds you there are things you can achieve on your own, right? So this is my temporary wisdom. I'm also going to steal one piece of wisdom from somebody else because it resonates so strongly with me. Change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change that we seek. Okay? And one last message from me, try to celebrate. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.